Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland Preview Podcast. The games are coming thick and fast, and just as we've caught our breath from our mad 2-2 draw at the weekend, Sunderland travel at Bramall Lane this Wednesday to face promotion favourites Sheffield United. It's been a little while since we faced Sheffield United in the league, so we've roped in Ben from Sheffield United podcast Blades Pod to give us the lowdown on Sheffield United and their past few years. Ben, how are you doing, mate? Are you okay?
I'm very good, thank you, Graham. And yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. The sun's gone, the rain's coming back, but I'm kind of used to that where I live. So I can't complain too heavily. And Sunderland are unbeaten as we speak at the moment, as frustrating as Saturday it might have been. I think, obviously, we're going to dig deeper into Sheffield United. There's plenty of things that I want to know about, let alone, people listening, hopefully. But we'll start from the top with the most recent stuff. You also coming into the game after a 2-2 draw, twice pegged back by Middlesbrough at the Riverside. What did you make of the game and Sheffield United's performance?
A strange one to process, really, in that I think a draw was probably the right result with Middlesbrough, particularly after they equalised. They hit the post with a really good chance. But yeah, to be ahead twice and, leading 2-1 with about 8-9 minutes to go is kind of frustrating to throw it away. I'm kind of happy with our 4 points so far. I think we've had quite a difficult start. I mean, Watford away, first game of the season, they still had that front three intact with Dennis and João Pedro. And there were Millwall, who I think we've beaten once in the last 11 years at home, despite playing them a bunch of times, just like a total kryptonite team for us. And then Middlesbrough, another sort of promotion favourite, with one of our former managers. So I'm encouraged by our start to the season, to be honest. I don't think we're quite clicking yet. We're still getting some players back from injury. Most of our signings are still sort of sat on the bench waiting to be used, I suppose. So I feel like we're giving ourselves quite a good baseline, really. And I'm hoping we're just going to keep improving as those new players find their way into the team in the next few weeks.
I think from a perspective of the start of the season you've had, obviously look at it, it's 1 win, 1 draw, 1 defeat. Technically, that's not what we'd expect a promotion favourite to have. But then you look through the fixtures, Watford away is a really tough fixture. Borough away is a really tough fixture. The other game you won. I think even from a neutral perspective, such as myself, it looks like it's been a largely positive start of the season. It was a largely positive campaign last year, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, once it got going, I suppose, yeah. I went, obviously last year was the first, return of fans. So I was incredibly hyped up for the season. Just so excited to get back to Bramall Lane and, see real football again, I suppose. And then it just sort of, the bubble burst very quickly. We lose the first game. I think we'd scored 1 goal by mid-September or something like that. Really struggling to figure things out under Slavisa Jokanovic. All the same, it was quite a surprise when he was relieved of his managerial duties. And then Paul Heckingbottom came in, had been working with the under-23s for a couple of seasons, and he's done a fantastic job, to be fair. He's made us, he's gone back to how we were playing under Chris Wilder, I think, with a few tweaks, but largely the same kind of format and formula that was so successful under Wilder. And it's definitely made us more solid. We'd built the squad to play in that system over previous years, but we're sort of sprinkling in a few more creative, I guess, sort of individually skilled players now to sort of give us that little bit of extra edge, I suppose. But yeah, overall, it was quite a fun season, to be honest. I mean, yeah, the second half of the season, I think it was only Forest picked up more points than us, and obviously, everyone knows how that ended up for them. By the end of it, I think I was more disappointed that losing the semi-final meant that the season had finished and there was no more football for me to go to than like the actual disappointment of, we just got knocked out of the playoffs. We're not going to be back in the Premier League. So yeah, it was fun. This is why I'm quite optimistic about this season, to be honest. We were absolutely annihilated by injuries in the second half of the season. I mean, we literally didn't have a fit striker for like the last 8 games or so. So yeah, it sort of feels like if we managed through all those injuries and still managed to finish in the playoffs and come within a shootout at Wembley, then we've got a decent sort of chance this season, I think.
You touched there on the pandemic and kind of all that kind of stuff. So I want to rewind back what feels like about 10 years ago, but actually I think it was just about 2.5 seasons ago. I think it's fair to say there's not been any season for Sheffield United in the past few years that has been boring, for the right or wrong reasons. And I think for a little while, alongside a couple of other teams, you did sort of become the blueprint for what Sunderland fans hoped could happen to our club, whilst we were kind of languishing in League One and struggling to get promoted. Because a side that went through the divisions, they said, well, it can be done, maybe one day. So maybe going back a little bit too far here, but that first Premier League season that you had prior pandemic, where you finished, I think it was top 10, I think it was 10th actually under Chris Wilder, 10th. Yeah, I thought I was right with that. How did that feel to be a Sheffield United fan at the time? Because I suppose we want a little bit of that sooner rather than later. So it'd be nice to know what it's like if and when we get there.
It was the best. Easily the most I've enjoyed a season up to the pandemic starting, obviously. So we got a good 2/3 of a season of being one of the best. Well, not one of the best teams in the league, but a top half team. When the pandemic started, I think we were 5th in the league. Like we just won a game and got into the top 6. And in all seriousness, I consider myself a fairly balanced Blades fan, to be honest. I'm not overly optimistic, I don't think, and I'm not overly pessimistic like a lot of football fans are either. But in all seriousness, we could actually make the Champions League here. We could finish in the Champions League places. I don't know if you recall, but Man City were going through some UEFA investigation over financial fair play, and it was very much in play that they would not be allowed into Europe next season, which meant the Champions League places would go down to 5th. So we were all sat there in February like, we could actually be in the Champions League next season. This is insane. But it was amazing. It was like the tightest kind of fan to player and manager bond I think I've experienced in, I guess, the 25 years or so I've been watching United. Football was exciting. We were, I would say, from a talent perspective, we were pretty big underdogs in most games. And, you kind of saw that in the following season when a little bit of the magic died, I suppose, and we couldn't find the solutions when teams adapted to us. But it was incredible. It was, it really felt like we were bloodying the noses of teams that were much bigger, much better resource, but they couldn't deal with that sort of unique system that we had. So a lot of players playing at their absolute peak that they, fell off from, sadly, like quite abruptly, I would say, over the coming seasons, and haven't got back to that. It was a perfect storm, and I think we did appreciate at the time of like, it's pretty long odds that I'm going to see my team win a trophy, like a cup, an FA Cup, a League Cup, or a Premier League is going to be almost impossible. So I think we did all appreciate at the time, like, hang on, finishing top 10 in the Premier League, like this might not happen again for like 20, 30, 40 years for all we know, with the the top heaviness of the Premier League. So yeah, it was incredible. I'm assuming that Leeds and Brentford have gone through similar seasons in the last couple of years as well. Hopefully Forest won't go through that this season, because I'm still slightly bitter about the way our season ended.
What's football without a bit of bitterness?
Exactly.
You touched on Chris Wilder there, and I guess that he's got nothing to do with the game coming up on Wednesday, and I do get that. But that the point of this is to make it as interesting as possible and get your viewpoint on Sheffield United. I think what most people, and maybe I'm speaking for people who don't agree with me here, but most people enjoyed watching about Sheffield United and Sunderland at the time was, well, first and foremost, you're all red and white stripes. That kind of works, so you can make a parallel immediately with that. But I think it reminded us an awful lot of when we went up under Peter Reid, under our 105-point season, 97, 98, 99, sorry. We had Phillips and Quinn, and we had players who are legends. I mentioned Phillips and Quinn, but also your Summerbys, your Johnsons.
Michael Bridges. I remember a game where
he ended Steve Bruce's career. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Not before time. I think he did us a favour in the long run with that one, to be honest. I remember that game very clearly.
Yeah, I think you did. I remember that, actually. Exactly the right season that you're speaking about. And I think you touched on there about the manager bond with the fans bond, and it was really hard not to admire, and still is really hard not to admire Chris Wilder as a man, and especially what he had with Sheffield United. You could see he bled Sheffield United, and although Peter Reid was a Scouser, that was an Everton man, he was someone that got Sunderland at the time, and there was parallels there, despite the kind of 20-odd year gap. I think I'm asking a silly question here, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Where does Chris Wilder rank at the moment with Sheffield United fans, like a year or so after he's departed the club?
it's difficult to, I guess, speak for all United fans, but I feel as someone with a bit of a finger on the pulse of this kind of thing, just from doing the podcast, I suppose, it almost feels like there's more divisiveness around Wilder now than there was when he left. I think, I don't know if that's just a natural, it was like a grieving process of like, we're actually better, here's all the bad things that he did for us as well. And look at the mess he left us in, blah, 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 blah. So I think there's more, sort of strong anti-Wilder sentiment now, but I would say that the vast majority of fans are like me in terms of just massive respect for what he did for United, what he gave, the ride was incredible. Really sad how it ended. And obviously the following year wasn't there's last 6 months of Wilder, and then the sort of 6-10 months that followed it weren't a great time to be a Blades fan either, I suppose. But yeah, overall, I mean, he certainly is the best manager and the most I've liked a United manager in the whole time I've been watching. And yeah, I'm pretty confident a lot of other United fans would, at the very least, put him into a bracket with like Dave Bassett, for example, in the early 90s, of someone who's just incredibly popular with the fan base, incredibly well thought of for what he achieved with us.
Yeah, which was massive. And on that second season, I think one big thing you could tell from the first Premier League season was Bramall Lane was an absolute fortress. Like, I think I remember watching at work. Obviously work, if you are listening, I was working. I was not watching the telly. And I think you beat Manchester United. I think it was 2 or 3-0. And I mean, obviously everyone does that these days, but at the time that seemed like quite a big result. But it was a real fortress. And I think one of the reasons it was pinpointed from afar that you kind of fell out with the Premier League and had a poor second season syndrome, or whatever they call it these days, was the fact that there was no fans, there was that no extra, 12th man, 12th woman, extra lift in the second season. But as you say, your fingers on the pulse, you're a Sheffield United fan. What were your thoughts on why the performance in the second campaign was so poor that resulted in relegation?
Everything went wrong is the short answer. Injuries that we'd been historically incredibly fortunate or skilled, I suppose, to avoid injuries that caught up with us in a massive way. Jack O'Connell, the centre-back, was so important to us in the whole rise from League One to top 10 in the Premier League. He unfortunately hasn't played for us for the last 2 years now, and who knows when he's going to come back. And it really just had a knock-on effect from there. That we built this kind of unique system, I suppose, and teams did adapt to stopping it. We saw that post-lockdown in the Premier League season. We suddenly found it very hard to score goals. We were defensively great, but very hard to score goals. And that carried on to the next season. We reached a stage where if we went a goal down, the game was essentially over. So many pundits were kind of citing this thing of like, oh, United have lost 10 games by 1 goal or whatever. How unlucky have they been? But to be actually watching the games, you're like, well, teams only need 1 goal, and then they know they can just protect. They don't really need to push it that much. So, that was that was a problem. The injuries, I think, not being able to adapt to tactics. A lot of players stopped being good. Frankly, they'd been playing to levels we didn't think they could get to. I would say 4 or 5 of the starting 11 were probably of that ilk, and they've really just fallen off a cliff post-COVID almost, after that, after the lockdown and the restart. So that didn't help. And almost none of Wilder's signings were even close to successful in that the point after we got promoted to the Premier League. They were good in the first season. Almost all of them were, non-factors at best, really, in the second season, with a couple of very slight exceptions. We got off to a bad start and we couldn't turn it around. We had a good. I'm trying to remember the first game now. Oh, we lost at home to Wolves, where they scored from their first 2 shots of the game. So you're like, well, we've lost that one. Wolves are a Champions League contender. Second game, we missed a penalty at Villa, ended up losing 1-0, conceded from a corner. Third game, missed a great chance against Leeds. They score in the 95th minute to win 1-0. And suddenly you're going, we've got 0 points from our first 3 games. We haven't scored a goal yet. We've got Chelsea and Liverpool and Man U next and stuff like this. Like, we could genuinely have 0 points after 7 or 8 games. And then that's pretty much game over in the Premier League. So yeah, it was a perfect storm of badness that we were unable to turn around. And yeah, if Chris Wilder couldn't turn it around, I don't think anyone was going to turn it around, to be honest.
Funny you talked about that season. I remember talking about the parallels that we hoped Sunderland would have when you were doing well in the Premier League, and kind of the parallels of the Peter Reid side. We actually recognised that season a lot more from a Sunderland perspective of losing the sort of first 7 or 8 games and the way that it went, because of course I think we have the second and third worst points total in the Premier League of all time. But less of the negatives. Onto the positive aspects of Sheffield United at the moment. It does seem like you mentioned before about the grieving process. I do think that is a really valid point to make, because it was so good under Wilder and because it ended so sad. It probably takes you a while to get at that point where you're still probably processing it almost in a way. But Heckingbottom as a whole seems to be quite well liked at Sheffield United. He had a tough time up in Scotland with Hibs. It didn't work out for him at Leeds. Obviously was very well respected at Barnsley, but he seemed to make some sort of comeback at Sheffield United, where he seems to be, I wouldn't say, wildly popular, but he seems to be very well respected at Sheffield United. Assuming you're a fan of him, why has he proven to be such a popular boss?
I like him more than I thought I would, to be honest. I don't know. I don't want to say I was like opposed to him signing, becoming manager. Sounds a bit high and mighty. It was just it was a bit of a red flag for me that we'd gone all in the summer before to get Jukanovic, who, very proven track record in the Championship. I'm sure we will have had to pay him a lot of money to bring him in, to be honest. And then 4 or 5 months into the season, we just rip that up and go, actually, we're just going to make the under-23s guy, like the head honcho. I think we give him a 5-year contract or something like this. And I'm sort of going like, where is the process here? This doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But he's done a really good job. And he's a likable character. He has gone back to, as I said, a system that maybe is a bit less exciting to United fans that want to see something a bit more expansive, I suppose. But he's gone back to basics in terms of what the strengths of the squad. I think that's probably the shorthand way to describe it. Under Jukanovic, we were kind of playing to our weaknesses a little bit because he wanted to play one way and we didn't have the players for it. Whereas Heckingbottom sent us back to playing to our strengths, and winning matches is more fun than losing them. That buys you a lot of leeway. I'm not saying the football's drab or anything like that. It's certainly not. But I think he, I like. He talks a lot of sense. He doesn't generally, BS the fans or anything like that. I think because his past experiences at youth level as well with our under-23s, he's been kind of tasked with bringing a lot of younger players into the team, and he's definitely done that. We've seen, I can think of sort of 7, 8 academy graduates who've kind of, been given a debut in the last 12 months or so, or however long it is since he took over. So yeah, there's a lot to like about him, to be honest. I have some question marks about like in-game management, I suppose, but I mean, you have that about a lot of managers, don't you? I think the day-to-day, week-to-week stuff, I think, has been near on perfect, to be honest. So yeah, he's doing a really, really good job.
In terms of the signings he's brought in the summer, you touched on majority have been on the bench. However, you might see 1 or 2 of them, and you can't make any judgment on a player after 3 games. Fully aware of that, although I'm sure we all have. Out of the transfer business you've been relatively active. Who've been the most impressive from what you've seen?
So we brought in a Bosnian centre-back, Arnold Ahmedhodzic, which I had to spend quite a bit of time learning how to pronounce, because I'm used to us having players called John Fleck and Chris Basham and things like that. He's been phenomenal. So he, speaking of Chris Basham, he was kind of instrumental to our rise, playing on the right of the back 3 and just constantly bombing forward with the ball. He would be he's a centre-back who's so important to our attacks. I'd say he had one of his first sort of proper injuries midway through last season. First proper injuries with us, I mean. Hasn't totally come back the same player, I think. So we brought in Ahmedhodzic, and he just looks like the natural successor. Very tall, athletic centre-back, but as soon as he gets on the ball, he's gone. He's driving into whatever space is there. Seems to be a good passer as well. So, yeah, he's a pleasant surprise. He's our first sort of player we've paid money for in almost 2 years, I think. So we paid $3 million for him, and I don't always put that much stock into this, but when, a lot of kind of football analytics accounts on Twitter or something like, whoa, only you got in for only 3 million, it sort of does make you raise your eyebrows and get a little bit excited. And yeah, he's possibly at fault for one of the goals yesterday, but overall, a really promising start for him. He's only played 2 games so far, to be fair, but yeah, he's the one that's immediately caught the eye, I'd say.
You touched on Chris Basham there. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, if you are listening, but massive Sunderland fan, I just believe as well. I think he's a South Shields born, massive Sunderland fan. So he has my respect, even if he hasn't come back quite in form from his injury. I'm sure he'll be pleased to know. I think in terms of other players that you look at in the squad, there's loads of recognisable faces that are still there from the sort of Premier League era. There's also players that have done well at other clubs. I think off the top of my head, Fotheringham obviously did a job at Rangers. John Fleck is obviously a player that's been there for years now and been there for ages, and everyone knows his quality at this level. John Egan is obviously someone we know well, came through our academy and then we let him go for free. Of course, yeah. Which was a great move from us looking back. But who is the man that makes Sheffield United tick? Who should be the one that Sunderland fans are like, right, hang on, we need to take him out of the game to have any chance of winning?
A slightly divisive figure among United fans for some reason. I've no idea why, but Ollie Norwood is just a master playmaker, really. He has his limitations, but if he has a poor game, United have a poor game. So if you're asking me who is the sort of man that makes us tick, it is definitely Norwood. Range of passing is brilliant. Has like almost 0 goal threat. Crossing is sometimes questionable. His set pieces are terrible. But when he doesn't play, we are terrible. Like, he is the man that keeps everything rolling over. In terms of like one player to watch out for, like I think a probably more obvious candidate is Sander Berger at this in the last sort of 6-7 months or so that he's played. He's been what we hoped he would be, which is a player who is like far too good for the Championship. He cannot be tackled. Like, once he gets the ball out of his feet, he's so big and strong and smart that teams just have to foul him or let him go. And the only frustration with him is it's like, just do that every time. Like, every time you get the ball, just dribble past everybody. But yeah, he's got 2 goals in his last 2. He ended last season really well as well. We finally found a role for him. I don't know. We were kind of messing about with him when we brought him in, like, trying to play him like as a deep lying midfielder. And Heckingbottom has basically just gone, no, you're playing on the right of the 3 in midfield. Get forward as much as possible. Get in the box. Shoot when you get the chance. Cross when you get the chance. And yeah, he's a great player. I'm not totally convinced he's still going to be here at the end of August, to be honest. I hope he is. But to be fair to United, we are digging our feet in on prices with him. He's not going to go cheap. Our owner doesn't have much money to play with, but he doesn't accept the first offer as previous owners have done. So if he does go, we're going to get a good chunk of money for him. But my worry is he goes quite late in the window and we don't have like time to adequately replace him. Not that we could really replace him anyway, because he's just so damn good. I love watching him play.
Yeah, I'm really good friends with a Sheffield United fan, actually. Was at Bramall Lane with him for the England semi-final against Sweden, and I was obviously catching up and stuff, and I was like, oh God, we're actually playing each other in league competition. I was also at Bramall Lane for the Max Power goal when I think you debuted your disco lights that night. Less about that one, the better, maybe potentially. You had some
Wait,
sort of
what was that? Is that not, are you sure that's not the other Sheffield team?
Oh, definitely not. I remember us playing them away quite recently and quite well. But it was,
wait, was that the League Cup?
It was a League Cup. Yeah.
I did go to that. Yeah. Man, Max Power. I do remember that. Yeah. I didn't realize they were disco lights. Sorry, I was not. I was not totally paying attention to that game, despite being there.
I don't think I was, to be fair. But it was a nice night out, nonetheless. But he in particular touched on Sander Berge, and I think probably from the outside looking in, if I was to mention someone myself I wanted to watch, that would be someone that was there as well. But he has similar worries that he might not stay beyond, obviously, the transfer window. For us, sadly, he's probably going to be in the starting lineup for Wednesday at least. On to Sunderland, I always find, especially in League One, it was always interesting asking an opposition fan what you thought on Sunderland, because it can be varied, funny, completely, utterly incorrect. Whereas at Championship level, it's been a while since we've been here. We're playing teams that we haven't played in a while, but will have known of us. And I think, we said before that our blueprint, or maybe the blueprint would have been Sheffield United a few years ago, kind of bounce through the leagues and go straight up. I think most of us are quite measured and know that that's not going to happen, and we'll probably take 14th to 15th. But maybe, just say maybe we did it, because we're in 6th, right? So let's just pretend we might actually get the playoffs this season. I don't think it's going to happen, but pretend we did and we went back to playoffs. Whilst none of us are expecting it this season, or most of us aren't, what does Sunderland need to do if they're going to rise back to the Premier League sooner rather than later, from the experience that you had with Sheffield United doing it?
It's kind of a boring answer, but defense is really important when you're going for the playoffs. Like, if you can just keep teams to zeros and ones, it sounds really obvious, but suddenly only needing to score 1 or 2 goals to win a game is such a big deal. That was the blueprint for our promotion when we finished second. It was a big part of why we went from lower reaches of the table last season to finishing the playoffs pretty comfortably in the end. And unfortunately, we just couldn't close it out in over 2 games against Forest. We ended up conceding a couple of goals at home, and that really put us behind the 8 ball. We were ultimately not quite able to turn it around. But yeah, just having that defensive solidity is massive. It's not even really about having a good goalkeeper. I think it's just, can you restrict teams to few shots, few good chances? I mean, when Heckingbottom took over, I think we only conceded. In fact, this will still be true this season. We've only conceded 3 goals or 2 goals, I think, at home since he took over. So you're looking at like 15 games now, including this season. That's massive. That gives you such that's basically saying every home game you're going to get at least 1 point, and you only score 1 goal to get 3. So sounds very basic and obvious, but that's been at the core of how we've got promoted. Well, how we got promoted last time, how we're finishing the playoffs the time before. So unless you've got a Fulham level attack, defense wins championships, as American sports fans say, although of course they would say defense.
They would. I think from the outside looking in, like I say, we know that we're a newly promoted side, and I think we'd be quite comfortable just being established here. But it seems like a lot of people on the outside, as we were speaking off air, sometimes rate Sunderland a little bit higher. I don't know why. I think maybe it's momentum, maybe our previous history, the 100 years of history says we've been at this level or higher. But how do Sheffield United fans see the game on Wednesday? Obviously, you're coming up a home game for a side that is, a lot of people have tipped for promotion. You'll be hoping for promotion, be it automatic or playoffs. You're coming up against a newly promoted side that, yes, is unbeaten, but had a bit of a disappointing end to the game on Saturday. Is this game seen as a very winnable one, or do you see it a little bit trickier than maybe what you would a newly promoted side normally?
Yeah, probably trickier than other newly promoted sides, I suppose. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I mean, you have had a good start. Obviously, ended last season really well. I think United fans are generally quite respectful of someone's status, for want of a better word. Like your prospects for this season. That's probably a better way of describing it. My podcast co-host had you as we had to pick up a surprise team between each, and he has Sunderland to be in the playoffs, I think, which is not that surprising. I see a lot of people have done that already. It still feels so early for us, to be honest. But I feel like we are kind of finding it feels like we've already shown that even when we're not playing that well, we can still beat teams, which is kind of how we were under Heckingbottom last season as well. So I'm optimistic from my perspective. Our home record has been fantastic. As I said, under Heckingbottom, we've only lost once at home since he took over, not including the playoffs. We've started a lot of our home games recently, going back into last season, like an absolute train, to be honest. We just sort of managed to get a couple of goals up very quickly and then kind of just see it out. And I'm excited to potentially see some of these players coming off our bench as well. I'm not totally sure why Heckingbottom hasn't used the likes of Kadra and McAtee, who are both here on loan, as potential game changers or counter-attacking options. I expect they will probably be more involved on Wednesday. So I'm excited. I actually missed our first home game of the season because I had COVID, which was super annoying. So I haven't been to a game in person since the end of last season, obviously. So I'm just like, yes, get me to Bramall Lane. Cannot wait for it.
In terms of if Sunderland were to say it ruin your return to the Stadium of Light, which I'm going to do predictions in a little bit. You'll probably see that I'm not that confident. But who are the players that are you concerned by from a Sunderland perspective going into the game, just from what you've seen from us this season?
So Ellis Sims has obviously had a fantastic start, and he's on loan from Everton, right? They could probably use him. What are they doing? They don't have a forward.
Don't tell them that.
He's really caught the eye. I mean, obviously he's got the goals to go with it, but statistically has had a really strong start to the season as well. I pay quite a lot of attention to advanced stats and XG and stuff like that. And yeah, he's right up there. I think last time I looked, he was like top 10 for expected goals per 90, and he was top 5 for shots per 90 as well. So yeah, a player that is able to find space so far and create shots for himself is always one to be concerned about. I think I don't believe he's actually played that much for you this season, unless he started the other day or played the other day. But Patrick Roberts is a name that I've always kind of wanted us to be in for, to be honest, going like 3 or 4 years. And obviously he had a big hand in knocking our neighbours out of the playoffs as well. So a lot of respect for him, and I will be very on edge if he is on the ball running at our defenders.
But slightly giving him a little clap at the same time for what he did last season.
Yeah, so he might get a little cheer, to be fair, if he's in the starting lineup.
Fair play. When we sent them down as well, actually, one of his goals sent them down for Derby, kept them there.
He did, yes, of course.
I don't think Sheffield fans will enjoy me saying that, but nonetheless, I don't have to get any of them on for a preview pod this season, so hopefully they'll let me off. I think last question, as it always is score prediction. I normally go first, and I think I'm going to go for a first here, and I have no shame in doing it. I'm trying to be more realistic this season if I can, because last season in the League One, I think I just predicted us to win every game because that was the expectation, which wasn't the case, but thankfully we got promoted. I think it's a tough game. I think Sheffield United is really hard. I think one of the big things for me is looking at the reason we've dropped points against Coventry and QPR at home haven't been because we played poorly, but there's been people on the bench that they can bring on and change the game, where at the moment our squad's probably not quite at that level. Good starting 11, not a great deal that'll change it, especially not on a cold Wednesday night, Sheffield against one of the promotion favourites. So maybe this is negative, but I'm going to actually go against us and say I think we'll lose 3-1. But Ben, where do you think the goals will be scored on Wednesday?
You say a cold night in Sheffield. It's beautiful here.
Oh, I just figured I live in Scotland, so I just figure it's wet everywhere in the United Kingdom.
Oh, right. No, definitely shorts weather in Sheffield tomorrow evening for anyone who's coming to the game.
A sunny evening in Sheffield. I'll rephrase that.
Yeah, maybe not sunny. I won't go that far, but it will at least be fairly warm. I don't think we're quite clicking just yet. So until I see that start clicking, I'm not going to go overboard with our prediction with the prediction. But I will go for a 1-0 win for United, just because that's kind of what we've done under Heckingbottom. Really kept it very tight. Regardless of how good the opposition attack is, don't score that many goals ourselves. But when we do get ahead, we tend to stay ahead, particularly at home.
If people do want to listen, obviously, to your podcast after the show, I find it really interesting listening to the opposition viewpoint, because it's completely not biased towards Sunderland. So you get a bit more of an all-round view, which is maybe why people like knowing which players you're concerned by when I do it on this podcast. But if people wanted to listen to your reaction to the game and to Sheffield United stuff throughout the season, where can they find you? Yeah,
so the podcast is Blades Pod. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts, of course. And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter or check me out on Twitter at BladesPod as well. And we will have a preview episode out probably tonight, which will obviously talk about our last game as well as Sunderland. And then if Sunderland win and you want to bask in the glory of moaning Sheffield United fans, then look out for that on Thursday, I suppose.
Yeah, well, hopefully, fingers crossed. But Ben, thanks always for coming on. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, you have a horrible Wednesday night, but that's just part of the course, mate. Thanks for coming on nonetheless.
Pleasure. You're welcome.